Over the past 6 months, I've tried multiple times to make a video of what I've watched this month or this winter or this spring or whatever. I was in my last semester of college and I was cramming a lot of stuff into one semester, and I'm still reaping the fallout as I write this, but I think that this is the right choice and I'm sticking to it. 2024 has been a pretty middling year so far in terms of releases, but there have definitely been more ups than downs. My friends and I have also made a pretty valiant effort to introduce ourselves to some classics and popular movies that we haven't seen. Over the course of the first half of this year, I've also gotten the opportunity to take part in some pretty amazing projects. I was in the writer's room, and I also starred in a short film called The Love Application, directed by Emma Young, and I'm also going to be playing a small role in the currently running web series Cuffed by Christmas, created by Jalen Horn and Leighton Fish. I also get to shoot and edit this really awesome visualizer for Behor in his new single called Angel, which is available on Spotify right now. So yeah, I've been pretty busy, but I still managed to fit a solid amount of movies into this time. Thanks to some amazing friends, I got to see some amazing movies in theaters, so I'll be giving constant shout outs throughout this video because they deserve it for the beautiful humans that they are. In January, I watched a total of 11 movies. Killers of the Flower Moon, Anatomy of a Fall, Asteroid City, Past Lives, Jane Gillis' Beautiful Dogs, Society of the Snow, Spirited Away, Ted, The Creator, The Zone of Interest, Run Lola Run. I'm not going to spend time talking about all of these. Spirited Away is directed by Hayao Miyazaki and is probably the greatest animated movie of all time. There is a lot of competition for that title, but this ended up being one of the most emotionally satisfying adventure movies I've ever seen. Chihiro is an endlessly watchable character, but is also such an easy insert character where you're able to almost relive a childhood memory through her. I just adore the inclusion of some pretty intense sequences providing stakes to the story and not just letting this be something light and fluffy. But this is such a deep and beautiful look into a child coming to realize the true responsibilities of adulthood. The Zone of Interest was one of the coolest theater experiences I've ever had. It felt like I was in a constantly moving art exhibit. This is kind of a miracle of a movie that made me do nothing but think, similar to the effect of Oppenheimer. I'm unable to put into words how this experience felt. It felt kind of like I was trapped in a moment, but I was fascinated the whole time. But I don't think I've ever begged for a movie to brutally kill its protagonists quite like this movie. Plenty of moments in this movie had me like... Killers of the Flower Moon is a movie that is still constantly being talked about far after the award season, and I think it's well deserved, as this is an amazing director operating at the top of his game. This feels like this was made by someone who cares so much about making a satisfying, honorable, and epic story that the film feels like a piece of literature. The editing for me is the true standout of this movie, with incredibly unexpected cuts that blew me away. I aspire to be able to edit like Thelma Showmaker. I wish I had the creative mind for editing that she does. Every single performance, save for one big man, is pitch perfect and exemplifies how an actor properly embodies a real person. It's not about impersonating someone, it's about honoring that person. A historical drama done so right, it makes me feel like a failure. Like it's so good it makes me mad. In February, I watched 16 movies. Little Caesar, which I watched in my Godfather class. Grounded 2, The Making of The Last of Us Part 2. The Godfather, take a wild guess where I watched this. Lisa Frankenstein. The Matrix, Bob Marley One Love, Night of the Living Dead, Amelie, 2001 A Space Odyssey, What About Bob, The Holdovers, Mean Girls 2024, The Godfather Part 2, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, and The Two Towers. I showed it to some friends for their first times, most like it.
Preemptively, I think I'll hate this.
Lee Mazzio's a hater, and The Loved Ones. On Valentine's Day, my friend Maddie took me to go see Amelie in theaters as a little singles day out. And as soon as the movie began, I knew that it would shoot up to my favorites of all time. This is now in my top 20 movies of all time. It's so joyful and exciting and creative. It's a movie that makes me love movies again, and it's able to give me the itch to just get out there and make things. It's a thoughtful and exciting movie with incredibly meticulous cinematography and editing, and is clearly a labor of love from all who were involved. The next day, my amazing friend Jake took me to go see 2001 A Space Odyssey on 70mm at the Angelica Theater in New York City. I've always said that I was waiting to see 2001 in the way that it was intended to be seen, which is on the biggest screen possible with the loudest sound possible and completely immerse myself. I specifically wanted to see it on 70mm because that was the format it was originally intended for, and boy oh boy did it kind of change me. It was one of the most special nights of my life. It made me feel like a kid again when I would go see movies with my dad and discover new types of movies and dreaming up ways of how they were able to accomplish certain things that take place. So needless to say, I'm very thankful for Jake. I also want to talk about The Diamond in the Rough, which is The Loved Ones, directed by Sean Byrne. It's a horror film that follows a young man who is kidnapped and tortured by a classmate and her father after he rejects her proposal to a school formal. This was a rewatch, yes, but I don't think that there are enough people who talk about how absolutely metal this movie is, and Sean Byrne is the king of making movies that feel like they just have hellfire running through their veins, and it's awesome. In March, I watched 17 movies. Dune Part 2, The Silence of the Lambs, Love Lies Bleeding, All the President's Men, Lake Mungo, Saint Maud, Monster, Poor Things, Damsel, 28 Days Later, Bodies, 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 Problemista, Alien, Immaculate, Knowing Chloe, and Irma Vep. First, I want to point out Knowing Chloe, directed by my friend Jake Bisnet. If you want to watch it, go down below. It's a wonderful short film about a young woman who has been named a hero, quote unquote, by her peers, and she comes to reject that status. And it's following an explanation as to why. It's just a constant knockout the whole time, and I really hope that you all go check it out. Dune Part 2 is obviously the star of the month, the star of the year, the movie of the year. I don't think it'll be beat. It's not my favorite of the year, but it's definitely the movie of the year. And that's all I'm going to say because I don't have anything to add that hasn't been said before. Problemista is in the running for my favorite film of the year so far, with a few other prominent contenders. But this is one of the most personal and hilarious movies I've ever seen, connecting with me on such a visceral level that it's hard to put into words just how vindicated a lot of this movie made me feel as a 20-something struggling to get his feet off the ground. Julio Torres and Tilda Swinton give such specific performances that are a lot more meticulous than they seem on the surface. Similar to Emma Stone in Poor Things last year, these are two actors acting absurdity as reality in the most satisfying and entertaining way possible, and I just adore it. All the President's Men quickly became a favorite as soon as the credits rolled, and I immediately wanted to rewind this movie and watch it all over again. It was such a masterclass in how to make these moments in an office feel so grand and important. It's also a movie that treats its audience with respect and doesn't handhold at all. And even as someone who isn't as educated about the Watergate incident, this was able to captivate me from the beginning to the final frame. I can't express enough how technically perfect this movie is. You genuinely just have to see it to believe it. Monster was one of the most impactful movies I've seen in a long time, with deep and complex characters that feel like everyone you've known for your entire life. If you don't know, this tells the story of a never-ending tailspin caused by a woman seeking action after she believes that her son is being abused by his new teacher. There is definitely a lot more going on that I'm not going to say, but what I will say is that this was probably the best script of last year, and I'm kicking myself in the ass for not seeing this much sooner. If you have a way to access this movie, go watch it. It's one of the most empathetic and touching movies I've seen about miscommunication in my entire life. I also got to see this with my amazing friend Eric, who's currently running a campaign to fund an incredibly cool and innovative underwater short film called Descent. I'll leave a link down below to all of the information on where you can donate. In April, I watched a whopping 24 movies. I saw Immaculate again. I saw Monkey Man, Mother, But I'm a Cheerleader, The Omen, The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, The Fall Guy, La La Land, Dazed and Confused, Election, Civil War, Watcher, The Sweet East, The First Omen, The Big Lebowski, Late Night with the Devil, John Wick 2, John Wick 3, Spider-Man 2, The People's Joker, Abigail, Boy Kills World, Challengers, and The Exorcist 3. The Fall Guy is one of the most surprising movies of the year so far, and I haven't always been the biggest fan of David Leitch out there. Bullet Train was fun, but it was way too long, and the excitement of the movie died out really quickly. This was the complete opposite of that. There was nothing keeping me from not liking this movie, and it was some of the most fun I've had in a theater this year. I was laughing, I cheered, I gasped, I even got a little teary-eyed. But most of all, I couldn't help but be kind of in awe of how much respect this movie pays to movies, and it treats filmmaking like a job that truly matters rather than a means to money, and I really appreciated that. Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt do some of their most fun work. Stephanie Hsu, Aaron Taylor Johnson, and Hannah Waddingham eat up their screen time. The People's Joker was another surprise for me, as I was expecting this movie to feel like the cringy posts you find on any Batman fanfic subreddit. Yet, this was a divisive movie that left a little bit of a spell on me. It made me laugh countless times, it shocked me, and it made me cheer. I didn't really expect anything from this at all, but I'm so glad that I got to experience this in a theater and not at home, where I definitely wouldn't have been as immersed or paid attention to any of the finer and funnier details. There is definitely enough room for criticism. Yes, the acting is pretty terrible, the green screen keying is god-awful, the cinematography is inconsistent. Yes, I get all of that, but I don't really give a shit. This feels much less like it's trying to be anything other than a joke, but an earnest joke. For that, I respect and love the hell out of this movie. Also, Lee Mazzio is a hater. One day, after admitting I had never seen it, my good friend Rajesh sat me down and revealed to me the beautiful cinematic spectacle that is La La Land, directed by our Lord and Savior Damien Chazelle. There's been plenty said about the quality of the film, like how incredible the performances are, how every shot is like a painting, how perfectly the music weaves itself into the story, and how meticulously it's blocked and directed. What I want to talk about is the change in reception to this movie over the past nearly 8 years since its release. I remember back when this came out, it seemed like everyone around me hated it, except for the movie buffs or musical theater kids or soon-to-be English majors. This movie was a story that people weren't expecting to be as perfect as it was, while also being wrapped in the messiest of bows possible. This isn't a happy ending, but it's the happiest it would end up being. I also want to give a quick shout out to Civil War for being one of the most effective experiences I've had in a while. It stuck with me to this day, and the movie still frightens me to an extortionate degree. In May, I watched 14 movies. The Sweet East, Dogville, Turtles All the Way Down, Anyone But You, Baby Reindeer, I know it's not a movie, but I'm still counting it, X2, Mad Max Fury Road, Planet of the Apes, I Saw the TV Glow, Furiosa, Mad Max Saga, Godzilla -1, The King of Comedy, and Videodrome. The Sweet East was Sean Price Williams' directorial debut after having been the cinematographer for movies like Good Time and Uncut Gems. This is one of the most bonkers movies I've ever seen, with the protagonist fully willing to look past techno extremists, Nazis, art freaks, and religious extremists in the name of just kind of catching a vibe. This is one of the only movies that came out last year that came close to perfecting a very heightened and chaotic style of filmmaking on such a small and intimate scale. This isn't bombastic or super colorful. This is just incredibly intelligent, yet asinine, and it's a great dark comedy that I'm gonna remember probably for the rest of my life. Dogville was written and directed by the Pie himself, Lars von Trier. It tells the story of a woman hiding in a very small town from a group of criminals, and as she begins to lengthen her stay, the consequences of that decision start to roll out in horrific fashion. I had no idea what this movie was going to be like going into it. All I knew is that we come to this place to laugh, to cry, to care. Lars von Trier was going to be the one telling us to do it. But this was a lot more uniquely executed than I expected, and I honestly loved it. The movie was definitely way too long, and I hated the 30 frames per second, even though I know that von Trier does it often. But I think that this is such a layered story emotionally, but being told on a completely bare stage is so incredibly smart and emphasizes a lot of the horrors happening in plain sight, something that von Trier definitely knows how to do. Turtles All the Way Down is probably going to be the most special movie of the year for me. I was a huge fan of the book when it came out, and it quickly became my favorite of John Green's books. I loved Asa and Daisy and how they each brought out the best and somewhat the worst of each other out, and it was so interesting. And the way that John Green captures what it's like to be in a brain with an anxiety disorder was so effective and accurate. This movie, gratefully, in my opinion, gets everything perfect. This is one of the best YA book-to-movie adaptations I've ever seen. It's beautifully directed with incredible cinematography and editing. The performances all around are really good. Isabella Merced does falter a bit in some of the key moments like the car scene, but Cree is a revelation in this movie and she needs to be doing a lot more work. Please praise Hannah Marks. Baby Reindeer is one of the most enticing and singular pieces of television ever made. It's a thrilling and touching journey through the memories of someone whose intense trauma has formed them into a completely new person. There's nothing that I can really say about this that hasn't been said already, but what I will say is that I feel like the filmmaking is underappreciated, and I think that both the cinematography and the editing are two of the biggest standout elements of the show, and taught me a lot about how I want to make television one day. I saw the TV Glow as one of the biggest surprises of the year. I was familiar with Jane Schoenbrunn after having seen her previous film, We're All Going to the World's Fair. So I knew what I was getting into, and I knew that this would end up being a surrealist journey through psychological torment. And that is exactly what I got, and I adored this film. I understand that some people think this movie was confusing or unfinished, but I think that as a whole, it's a perfect story that's told in such a satisfying way that I think that it was meant for a certain group of people. Buffy the Vampire Slayer remains my favorite TV show of all time. I have the classic DVD box set. I've seen the show maybe a total of 8 or 9 times. It was an essential part of my adolescence, and it taught me a lot about how to be a compassionate human to everyone around me, and my attitude and outlook on life fully changed after I finished that show for the first time after having spread my watch out over the course of a year in the entirety of 2015. So needless to say, this movie was made for me. It was an incredible exploration into the mind of someone manifesting their warped perception of reality into a TV show in which they hope, pray, and wish they could only live their lives inside of. Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, was probably my most anticipated movie of the year. Mad Max Fury Road constantly inches itself towards being my favorite action movie of all time. It's a huge comfort movie for me, and whenever I don't know what to put on, I typically just throw on Fury Road. Therefore, with a lot of these elements coming together with the casting of one of my top 5 favorite actors working today, it's safe to say that I had pretty high expectations for this movie, and it's also safe to say that they were mostly met. Furiosa is probably the most fun I've had in a theater so far this year. It had a great script brought to life by an ensemble of A+ performances, and it nailed the main objective of being a brutal revenge tale. It definitely wasn't as gritty or fast-paced as Fury Road. This movie also felt a little too slick and looked a little too perfect at times to the point where it lost some of the realism. I say realism in regards to a Mad Max movie like it's normal, but these movies have alternating styles, and I understand this one looking slicker, being that there was a series of Fury Road comics after the film was released. But this was some of the best revenge I've seen in an American revenge movie in a while. It was well-deserved and very particularly fucked up, and I expected nothing more from George Miller's sick and wonderful mind. So those were the films I've watched over the first half of the year. I've been so grateful to be able to have seen so many of these in theaters, and some weeks or months early, and a lot of these I've seen with friends. Hopefully we can see an increase in overall quality this year, similar to 2022, but we can only hope. If you want to see some of the projects I've been a part of so far this year, I'll leave links and information in the description. Be sure to share some of the highlights of movies you've watched for the first time this year. Also, follow me on Letterboxd if you want to know some of my opinions before I make these videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you, Space Cowboy.